Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel Sola Stories. After being kicked out of my own master bedroom, I left in silence. 3 months later, I announced my will, and my son fell apart. I used to believe that you raise children to have support in your old age. Reality, however, hit me like a ton of bricks. It turns out, raising children is what makes you need support in your old age. That sentence is like a fine needle stabbing directly into my heart so painfully I can barely breathe. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, didn't even make a phone call. Not a single heads up. She just moved her parents, who live hundreds of miles away, into our home and settled them directly into what had always been my master bedroom. She was all smiles, her tone as light as if she were announcing a holiday. "Mom, you can stay with us in the guest room. My parents are getting older and have trouble getting around. The master bedroom has the balcony. It's brighter, and it's easier for them to get some Sunday." I just stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. The sunlight streamed through the patio doors. It should have been warm, but it couldn't touch the cold, lonely feeling inside me. I looked over, and the door to my bedroom was open, piled high with suitcases I didn't recognize and brightly colored bedding. I turned and looked at the small guest room. All my belongings, the things I'd collected over a lifetime, were piled in the corner like junk. Even the old recliner that belonged to my late husband was shoved sideways, crammed against the wall. My heart sank, piece by piece, as if I were falling into an abyss. It was a cold that went straight to my bones. Forget it, I thought. I'm an old woman. I've lived this long just to become an eyesore to them. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I knew that arguing with someone like Jessica would only make me look foolish. And as for my spineless son, Matthew, who is completely under her thumb, he wasn't worth wasting my breath on. That afternoon, while the four of them were enjoying a happy family nap, I quietly packed a small suitcase. They probably thought I was just throwing a tantrum, maybe driving to my sister's house for a few days, and that when I had nowhere else to go, I'd come crawling back, ready to be their free nanny and ATM again. How naive. My name is Eleanor Vance. Before I retired, I was an English teacher. I spent my life teaching, explaining countless lessons and holding firm to my principles. They had completely misjudged me. 3 months later, I called a family meeting in my old apartment, the one that is now bright, clean, and orderly. With them sitting right in front of me, I pulled out the will, already stamped and notarized, and calmly announced my plan for my estate. My son Matthew, the one who always just wanted to keep the peace and maintain a sense of superficial harmony, instantly turned bright red. He was furious, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He finally understood who really held the power in this family. But by then, it was far, far too late. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 62 years old. I'm a retired high school English teacher. My husband passed away from an illness several years ago, leaving just me and my son, Matthew. When I first retired, I thought I'd finally get to live a quiet life. But after Matthew got married and had his own son, I still couldn't completely let go. At his and Jessica's request, I moved in with them. I'd help watch my grandson, Leo, during the day, and I'd cook and clean in the evenings. Life seemed stable. On the surface, we were the picture of a happy, multi-generational family. But under that calm surface, the current was strong. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, is young, pretty, and knows how to turn on the charm. She seems sweet, but she is sharp and calculating. Her spending was out of control, new designer handbags, constant spa days, and nail appointments, while the bulk of the household expenses fell on me and Matthew. She was polite to my face, but the flashes of contempt and impatience in her eyes stung me like a needle. For example, she'd smile at dinner and say, "Mom, this is a little heavy. We're trying to eat clean now, low carb." But then she'd secretly order Leo a large pepperoni pizza. Or she'd pick up the reading glasses I left on the coffee table and say dramatically, "Oh, Mom, these frames are so vintage. I'll order you a new pair from Warby Parker." And then, of course, she never did. I chose to let all these little things slide. I told myself, a happy home is the most important thing. My son was caught in the middle, and it wasn't easy for him. Besides, the 3-bedroom, 2-bath house they were living in was mine. My late husband and I had saved for most of our lives to buy it. The deed is in my name, and my name only, crystal clear. When my son got married, I was generous. I said, "You two are just starting out, and life is expensive. Why don't you move in with us? There's plenty of space, and we can all help each other out." I never charged them a dime in rent. In fact, I often used my pension to help pay for the utilities and groceries. I thought all of this sacrifice would earn me their genuine gratitude and respect. But about a month ago, Jessica started casually bringing up her parents. "Mom, my parents' situation back home is just awful. Their rental is old and damp. It's freezing in the winter and humid in the summer. My dad's arthritis is so bad he can barely walk when it rains. And the doctors out there, they're just not as good. Maybe it would be better if they came here for a while, just to rest and get better." When she said that, my stomach tightened. I felt a heavy, sinking feeling. This house only has 3 bedrooms. With the 3 of us and Leo, it was already a full house. If 2 more people came, where would they even sleep? And our lifestyles are so different. With so many people under one roof, it would be a recipe for conflict. I tried to gently and politely express my concerns. "Jessica, it's wonderful that you want to take care of your parents, but you have to be realistic. We just don't have the space. If they came, where would they stay? And our routines are so different. I'm afraid they wouldn't be comfortable, and it would just make things harder for them." Jessica just smiled, didn't pursue it, and looked back down at her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea she had zero intention of actually discussing it with me. That day, I had a morning watercolor class at the local community college. I stopped for groceries on the way home, planning to make a nice dinner for everyone. The moment I turned the key and stepped into the entryway, I froze. There, piled by the door, were several beat-up suitcases and a couple of those big, striped, woven plastic laundry bags, bulging and out of place. I heard unfamiliar laughter coming from the living room. I took off my shoes and walked in to see 2 strangers sitting on my sofa, the spot where I always sit. They looked around with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. One was a man with graying hair and weathered skin. The other, an older woman in a floral print blouse, her face a map of wrinkles. It was Jessica's parents. I had only met them once, briefly, at the wedding. Hearing the door, Jessica hurried out of the master bedroom, stretching an artificial smile across her face. She looped her arm through mine, a little too affectionately. "Mom, you're home. Look, my parents are here." She announced it like it was wonderful news. "They're going to be living with us from now on. It'll be so much livelier with more people. I've already moved your things into the guest room," she continued, her voice bright and chipper. "The master bedroom is for my parents. They're older and light sleepers, and the master is quieter. Plus, it has that big balcony. The sun will be so good for them." Her words were crisp, and every single one hammered into me like a nail. This wasn't a discussion. It was a hostile takeover. There was no room for negotiation. I looked past her at the half-open door to my bedroom. My vanity, which I had used for over a decade, was gone. In its place were a strange thermos and several prescription bottles. The orchid I had carefully tended to for years was shoved into a corner, replaced by a fake plant I'd never seen before. And my books, my family photo albums, and the few keepsakes from my late husband. They were all now brutally crammed into the tiny, pathetic space of the guest room, like a group of homeless refugees. My son, Matthew, stood behind his wife, his eyes darting everywhere except at me. He was wringing his hands, and his lips trembled before he finally mumbled, "Mom, Jess, she's just trying to help." Help? How is this helping? This is a blatant, arrogant takeover of someone else's space, and they were talking about it like it was a noble act. In that moment, all I felt was an icy chill creeping up from my feet, straight to my heart, and into my head. Rage burned in my stomach like acid, and it hurt so much I could barely breathe, but I didn't explode. I took a deep breath, held it, and slowly let it out, forcing down the volcano of anger inside me. Arguing with Jessica would be pointless. She would just paint me as the unreasonable, petty mother-in-law. Arguing with Matthew would be even worse. He would just get flustered and hide behind his wife. In the end, this house would become a war zone, and I would be the one guaranteed to lose. I looked at Jessica calmly, gently pulled my arm out of her grip, and said flatly, "I see." Then I turned and walked silently to the guest room door. That small door felt like a barrier, separating two different worlds. Outside the door, I could hear Jessica and her mother laughing, excitedly discussing what kind of new curtains they should get and what flowers they should plant on the balcony, as if the room had always belonged to them. Inside the door was my world, thrown into chaos by my eviction. I looked at my personal belongings, tossed randomly in the corner. A few of my regular outfits were piled on the bed. The old books my husband had left me were on the floor, their pages bent. A picture frame had fallen over, the glass cracked in the corner. It was a photo of my husband and me when we were young, his bright smile still so clear. My heart felt like it was being sliced by that broken glass, a silent, twisting pain. Matthew came to the doorway, wringing his hands, his eyes full of helpless apology. "Mom, don't be mad. Jessica, she just..." He tried to explain, his voice weak. I didn't turn around. I just cut him off, my voice cold. "You don't need to say anything. I understand." And I did. How could I not? I understood Jessica's selfishness and her schemes. She had no respect for me as her mother-in-law, and even less respect for the fact that I was the actual owner of this house. I also saw my son's cowardice and weakness. In front of his overbearing wife, he didn't even have the courage to say a single word. There is nothing more painful than a heart that has given up. And once it's gone, even arguing feels pointless. I realized that the greatest distance in the world isn't between life and death. It's standing in front of your child, and he thinks it's perfectly natural to give your room to his mother-in-law. That afternoon, while Jessica was excitedly showing her parents around the neighborhood, Matthew made an excuse to slip out. He probably went to a sports bar to watch the game, anything to escape the reality of what he'd allowed to happen. I closed the guest room door and quietly began to pack. I didn't take much, just the most important things: my driver's license, passport, bank cards, a few pieces of jewelry, and that picture frame with the cracked glass, which I wrapped carefully in a shirt. The clothes, the bedding, the everyday items. I left almost all of it. They could have it. It would save me the trouble of dealing with it. I picked up my phone and dialed my sister, Carol. "Carol, I need a favor. Do you still have the number for that cleaning service you used? I need to hire a reliable crew to do a deep clean of my old apartment tomorrow. I'm planning on moving back in." I tried my best to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. Then, worried, she asked, "Eleanor, what happened? Did you and Jessica get into a fight?" "It's nothing major. I need some quiet. I didn't want to get into it. You don't air your family's dirty laundry. Besides, telling her would only make her worry." After I hung up, I called the cleaning service and arranged the time. With everything settled, I grabbed my small carry-on suitcase, ready to leave the house that was suffocating me. As I walked into the living room, Jessica and her parents were just returning, their hands full of bags from the grocery store, laughing and chatting. When she saw me with the suitcase, Jessica froze. Then, a fake smile quickly spread across her face. "Mom, where are you going? Why are you all packed? We're family. We don't let things fester. Don't be upset over such a small thing." She put her hand on my arm. "About the master bedroom. If you're really uncomfortable, we can definitely sit down and talk about it." She said talk about it, but her eyes were full of calculation. She had no intention of giving me the room back. She thought I was just throwing a tantrum, planning to stay with my sister for a few days until I cooled off or they offered some half-hearted apology, and then I'd come back. Talk about it? I thought. After you've already thrown all my things out, then we'll talk? I couldn't even be bothered to look at her. I turned my back and walked to the door to put on my shoes. "Mom, are you really leaving?" Matthew, who must have just gotten home, saw what I was doing, and panic flashed across his face. He reached out to stop me. Jessica, moving quickly, grabbed his arm and shot him a look. It was a look of cold, confident dismissal, as if to say, "Let her go. Where is an old woman going to go? She has no money, no support. She'll be back, ready to do what we say, soon enough." I laughed to myself, the nerve of these people. You give them an inch, and they take 10 miles until they've backed you into a corner. There's no point in reasoning with them. Better to just play your hand and let them face reality. Ignoring their drama, I opened the front door. I looked at Matthew and said, my voice like steel, I'm going back to my own home. You're on your own. Without a backward glance, I walked to the elevator. The doors slowly closed, shutting out Jessica's fake smile and Matthew's panicked, helpless face. The cab I'd called was already waiting downstairs. As I got in and watched the familiar streets blur past the window, I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I felt an incredible sense of relief and liberation. I felt like a prisoner who had finally broken free from heavy chains and was seeing the sun for the first time. There is no grief like a heart that has given up. But maybe that was a good thing. When the heart gives up, the pain stops. All that's left is a cold, clear calm. I had made my decision. There was no turning back. My old apartment was on the west side of the city. It was a unit my school had provided before I was married, which I later bought. It wasn't huge, just 2 bedrooms, but it was in a great location, and the neighborhood was quiet. It had been empty for years, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. The air was stale. The next day, the cleaning service arrived right on time. They worked hard all day, and by the evening, the entire place was spotless. I opened every window, letting the fresh air and bright sunlight flow in, chasing out the dust and the gloom. Looking at my familiar old furniture outdated, yes, but filled with memories of my husband and me picking out each piece, I felt a long-lost sense of peace and security. This was where I truly belonged. No fake smiles, no manipulative games, and no suffocating pressure. I rearranged the furniture, placed my husband's photo on the nightstand where I could see it, and put the orchid that had been neglected on a sunny windowsill. Life finally felt like it was back on track. I started planning my real retirement. I signed up for that watercolor class I'd always wanted to take at the community college. Every day, I painted, calming my mind. I met up with a few other retired teachers. We'd walk in the park or meet at a cafe, just talking and laughing. Life became easy, relaxed, and comfortable. At night, I'd make a cup of tea and watch some television or read a few pages of a book. When I felt tired, I'd go to bed and sleep straight through until morning. My whole body felt lighter. The insomnia and chest tightness that used to bother me all the time had simply disappeared, all without any medication. For the first few days, Matthew would call, his voice hesitant. Mom, are you doing okay over there? When are you thinking of coming back? I always gave him the same calm answer. I'm very comfortable in my own home. You don't need to worry about me. You just take care of yourselves and make sure you're looking after Leo. My voice was quiet but firm. My tone left no room for negotiation. After a while, he must have sensed my resolve, or maybe Jessica told him to stop. The calls became less frequent. Sometimes, he'd send a happy Thanksgiving text or a generic, "How are you feeling, Mom?" It felt cold, like he was just checking a box. I didn't care. I used to think that happiness in old age meant revolving around your children and grandchildren, worrying about them constantly. Now I understood. True happiness is having money in your bank account, being in good health, and living a quiet, peaceful life. And most importantly, not having anyone in your life who can effortlessly ruin your day. On my end, life was calm. On their end, however, Jessica was clearly starting to panic. She probably assumed that an old woman living alone would be overwhelmed by loneliness in a few days, or that I'd be unable to handle basic chores, and I'd come crying back. But a month went by, and not only did I not come back, I didn't even call to ask for help or complain. Her little trap had failed completely, and now she was nervous. First, she had Matthew call me, trying to test the waters and persuade me to return. When I didn't budge, she finally broke down and called me herself. When I answered, she started with some fake, syrupy concern, her voice cautious. "Mom, we're just not comfortable with you living all alone. And Leo, he asks about his grandma every day." I just made a non-committal sound, deliberately not taking the bait. She paused, and I could hear the irritation creeping into her voice. "Mom, you know, with my parents here, our expenses have really gone up. When you were here, you helped out, but now, the fox was showing its tail. She continued, hinting heavily. My dad's leg. The doctor said he needs physical therapy, and the co-pays are adding up. And Leo's soccer fees are due. Things are just really tight right now. It was all about one thing. She wanted me to give them money. I laughed silently to myself, but my voice was steady. Oh, really? Well, then you two will have to get better at budgeting. Jessica probably didn't expect that answer. She was stunned for a second, and then her voice turned hard. Mom, I just mean, you have a good pension. Can't you help us out a little? We're family after all. You have to think of the big picture. Family? I repeated the word, my voice dripping with irony. When you moved your parents in, took my room, and threw me into that guest room like a piece of trash, did you think about family then? Did you think about the big picture? I didn't give her a chance to argue. I cut right to the chase. Jessica, my pension is what I earned from a lifetime of hard work. It's my retirement security, and it's just enough for me to live on. Since you were able to move your parents in to live with you without my permission, then you can bear the responsibility that comes with it. You didn't consult me then, so don't expect me to pay for your decisions now. The second I finished, I hung up the phone. Listening to the dial tone, I let out a long breath. I used to be the all-powerful mother. Now, in their eyes, I was just a walking ATM. Well, too bad for them. From now on, this ATM serves only one customer, me. When she couldn't get what she wanted by being nice, Jessica immediately switched to playing dirty. It was her usual move, spread rumors and slander me behind my back. A few days later, the calls from relatives started. Matthew's aunt, Patty, called, her tone scolding. Eleanor, what is this I hear? You had a fight with the kids and moved out? Matthew and Jessica don't have it easy, you know. You're the mother. You need to be more understanding. You can't just get into a fight with your daughter-in-law like that. Then my distant cousin's daughter called, whispering, Auntie, Matt told me Jessica didn't think things through. Don't take it to heart. Your family, you can talk this out. We're all worried about you living alone. Behind all their words was the same message. I, the mother-in-law, was the one to blame. I was intolerant, cold-hearted, and petty. I had blown up at the kids over one small thing and abandoned my son. Listening to these twisted versions of the truth, all fed to them by Jessica, I was furious. But I held back. I didn't waste my time arguing with people who either didn't know the truth or were pretending not to. To the relatives who seemed genuinely concerned, I just said, Thank you for thinking of me. I'm doing just fine. I just wanted some peace and quiet. But to the ones who were clearly calling to scold me on Jessica's behalf, I didn't hold back. Oh, she doesn't have it easy? Who was there when I didn't have it easy? She wants her parents to live in my house, fine. But why does she expect to use my money to pay for it? Is her money not hard-earned? If she's such a good daughter, why don't you pay for her parents? After a few sharp comebacks like that, the calls tapered off. I knew Jessica's plan had failed again. But this whole thing taught me a valuable lesson. Gossip is dangerous. I couldn't just sit back and let Jessica slander my name. So, I started to methodically gather evidence. I scrolled back through old text messages, finding all the times Jessica had hinted I should pay for things for her, or complained that I wasn't generous enough. I also called an old neighbor I was still friendly with and quietly asked how things were going at the house since I left. As I expected, I got an earful about how Jessica was complaining about me, and even bragging about how she'd get the house one day. My neighbor even sent me a short voice memo she'd taken of Jessica complaining loudly to someone in the driveway. I also called an old friend who's a retired lawyer. I asked him for advice on estate law, property rights, and defamation. I wasn't planning to sue. I just wanted to know my rights. I needed to have my ducks in a row. I had to have the power to protect myself and fight back against their lies. If they wanted to sling mud, they were about to find out that I wasn't going to just stand there and take it. Time flew. Suddenly, it was the second month. Just as I predicted, without their free nanny and ATM, Matthew and Jessica's lives started to fall apart. Without my pension supplementing their income, their finances were a wreck. Jessica, who still spent money like water, quickly drove them into debt. And having her parents there wasn't just a financial strain, It was a cultural clash. Her parents were used to going to bed early and getting up at the crack of dawn, while Jessica and Matthew stayed up late playing video games or scrolling on their phones. Her parents liked simple, plain food. Jessica wanted spicy takeout and complained their cooking was bland. Her parents were frugal to a fault and constantly nagged Jessica about her wasteful shopping habits. At first, Jessica tried to put on a happy face, but it didn't last. She started openly complaining to Matthew that her parents were a burden and that they were drowning in bills. Matthew, stuck in the middle, was miserable. One night, he showed up at my apartment. He looked exhausted. His eyes were sunken. He hadn't shaved in days, and his t-shirt was wrinkled. The moment he walked in, his eyes filled with tears, and he choked out, "Mom, I can't do this anymore." He rambled, complaining about how unreasonable Jessica was, how difficult her parents were, how stressful life was. He finally broke down, sobbing and begging, "Mom, please just come back. Or at least, just lend me some money. We can't keep going. The whole family is going to fall apart." Looking at my son, so haggard and broken, I have to admit I felt a twinge of pity. He is my son, my own flesh and blood, the child I poured my entire life into. But right after the pity came the disappointment, and that helpless frustration of "I told you so." I handed him a glass of water and watched him gulp it down. Then I spoke, my voice quiet but firm. "Matthew, this is the path you chose. When Jessica insisted on moving her parents in and kicking me out, if you had shown even half of the courage you're showing me right now, if you had stood up for me and said no, we would not be here. But you chose to be silent. You chose to run away. You chose to let your mother take the fall. You should have known this was how it would end. You are an adult, and you have to take responsibility for your choices. Every problem you are facing right now is the direct result of the seeds you planted." I paused, looking at his pale, shocked face. "As for money, I will not lend you any, and you can go back and tell your wife that she will not see one single penny of my money. Ever." Matthew's lips trembled. He looked like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just lowered his head, completely defeated. I knew my words were harsh, but it was medicine he had to take. A soft heart is a liability, especially with people who are used to walking all over you. The softer you are, the more they take. I could not let him hold on to any false hope. After he left, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long, heavy sigh. I felt a strange mix of sadness and a new, sharp sense of resolve. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer friend again. "Hello, David. It's Eleanor Vance. I've been thinking about what we discussed, and I'd like to move forward. I need to draw up a new will." He was quiet for a second, then asked gently, "Eleanor, are you sure? You don't want to reconsider? He's your only son." "I'm sure," I said, without a trace of hesitation. "Some people just aren't worth the emotional energy anymore." David didn't try to change my mind. He just professionally explained the process, what I needed to do, and the documents I'd need to bring. After hanging up, I sat on my sofa and thought. My main assets were the 2 properties, the house they were living in, which was worth maybe $4 million, and my current apartment, which was smaller but still worth over $2 million. On top of that, I had several $100,000 in savings and some investments. It was everything my husband and I had worked and saved for our entire lives. I used to believe, without question, that all of it would go to Matthew. He's our only child. Who else would it go to? But now, my mind was changed. Matthew's weakness and Jessica's greedy, selfish nature had frozen my heart. If I left them that money, I could already see them burning through it, fighting with each other over every last cent. And me? I'd probably be left without a penny to my name. Absolutely not. My money would not be squandered by those ungrateful, grasping people. I took out a pen and paper and started to plan. Leo, my grandson, he was innocent in all this. And I had practically raised him. I loved him dearly. I couldn't cut him out completely, but I also couldn't let that money fall into Jessica's hands. After thinking it through, I decided I would set aside 10% of my total estate in a dedicated educational trust fund. I would designate a trustworthy executor, like my sister, Carol, or a professional firm. That money could only be used for Leo's future education. The principal could not be touched by anyone until he was an adult. As for the other 90%, I looked out the window at the bright blue sky, and my mind was clear. I was going to donate it. All of it. I'd give it to people who actually needed it, to foundations that give scholarships to poor students who can't afford college, or to organizations that help support the elderly who have no one. Rather than leave it to a son who didn't appreciate it, I would let my life savings make a real, meaningful difference. As soon as I made the decision, I felt 1,000 pounds lift off my shoulders. The next day, I gathered all my documents as David had instructed and went to the notary's office. I stated my wishes, word by word, my voice clear and firm. When I finally held that notarized, legally binding will in my hands, I was trembling slightly. It wasn't from fear or regret. It was the peace that comes from taking back control of your own destiny. I did it all by myself. I didn't tell a soul, not even my sister. This was my decision to make. I used to think the meaning of life was to leave the best for the next generation. Now I know the first priority is to live your own life with comfort and dignity. 3 months passed. During that time, just as I'd expected, the situation at Matthew and Jessica's house went from bad to worse. My sister told me they were fighting constantly, mostly about money. Jessica had apparently started complaining openly about her own parents, calling them a burden. Her parents, who were no saints themselves, fought back, accusing Matthew of being a spineless loser who couldn't provide for his wife. The house was a war zone. Even little Leo, she said, had become quiet and withdrawn. It was heartbreaking. Right at the 3-month mark, Matthew and Jessica showed up at my apartment. This time, Matthew wasn't crying or begging. They seemed to have formed some kind of united front. They were here to be aggressive. When I opened the door, Jessica had that familiar, sickeningly confident smile on her face, though I could see a flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Matthew stood behind her, his shoulders back, trying to look strong, though he still couldn't quite meet my gaze. "Mom," Jessica started, skipping the pleasantries. Her tone was demanding. "We've talked it over. This little apartment is fine for you. The house we're in. You need to sign it over to Matthew." She paused, then added, as if it were obvious. "After all, we've been living there for years, and Leo's school is in that district. It's our house now. You should just sign it over and save everyone the trouble later." I looked at them, so self-righteous, so entitled. My God, the nerve. They could say this with a straight face, treating my property as their own. But my patience had run out the moment they kicked me out of my room. I didn't argue. I just looked at them and nodded slowly. "I see. The house." I stepped aside. "Please, come in. Sit down. As it happens, I have something for you, too." Seeing that I wasn't immediately refusing, Jessica and Matthew shot each other a look of triumph. They thought I was caving. They thought I was going to sacrifice my own well-being for the good of the family or for my grandson. Jessica even smoothed her shirt, a little smirk playing on her lips. I poured them both some tea and sat down in the armchair across from them. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My eyes and theirs went to a large manila envelope on the coffee table. Jessica was staring at it, but she was still focused on the house. She took a sip of tea and asked impatiently, "So, Mom, what have you decided about the transfer?" I held up my hand to stop her. I slowly reached for the envelope. My movements were calm. I looked at their faces, which had suddenly become tense. "I asked you here today to make things perfectly clear." I tapped the envelope. "This," I said, my voice perfectly level, "is my last will and testament, fully executed and notarized." "A will?" They both yelped at the same time. The smug, expectant looks vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. Matthew's face went white. He turned to look at Jessica, who was now glaring at the envelope, as if it were a snake. "Mom, why would you make a will?" Matthew stammered, his voice shaking. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "It's a part of life, Matthew. When you get to my age, it's wise to get your affairs in order, to avoid complications." I didn't open the envelope just yet. I wanted them to hear it from me first. I wanted them to watch their greedy dream get shattered, word by word. According to my wishes, my entire estate, including but not limited to. I paused, then said each word clearly. The property on the east side where you currently reside, this apartment on the west side where I reside, and all of my bank accounts, investments, stocks, and bonds. Jessica's eyes lit up. She leaned forward, holding her breath. Matthew swallowed hard. Upon my death, I continued, my voice as casual as if discussing the weather, will be distributed as follows. Part 1. 10% of my total estate will be placed in a dedicated educational trust fund, to be used exclusively for the education of my grandson, Leo Vance. This fund will be managed by my sister, Carol Vance, and under no circumstances may the principal be touched by anyone until Leo turns 18. Jessica's face darkened. She was clearly furious about the restrictions. But before she could speak, I delivered the final blow. Part 2. The remaining 90% of my estate. I let my eyes travel over their faces, which were now turning an ashen gray. It will be donated, in its entirety, to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and a local hospice foundation to help underprivileged students and to provide care for the elderly. The words hung in the air. The room was so quiet it was suffocating. Even the ticking of the clock sounded loud and hostile. Matthew's face went from white to gray to a splotchy red. His mouth hung open. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping but making no sound. Jessica, however, shot up from the sofa. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her voice a high-pitched shriek of outrage. What? You're donating it? Are you insane? You're giving all our money to strangers? What about us? What about Matthew? He's your son. Your only son. Her voice was like a knife. I just stared at her, my face calm. Mom? Matthew, jolted by her screaming, finally found his voice. He stood up, trembling with rage. His eyes were bloodshot. How could you? How could you do this to me? I'm your son. How can you give our house, all our money, to strangers? How are we supposed to live? He was so angry, the veins in his neck were bulging. And there it was. The mask was off. The people who had talked about love and family were now showing their true colors. The second they found out my money wasn't going to them, the pretense of love vanished, revealing the raw, ugly greed underneath. Facing their hysteria, I felt strangely calm. This must be what it feels like to be truly done. When you're past the disappointment, their hysterics just look ridiculous. I picked up my teacup, blew gently on the surface, and took a sip. I looked at Matthew. How could I? I set the cup down. My voice was low, but it cut through their shouting. When you gave my master bedroom, the room I lived in for decades, to your in-laws and kicked me into that tiny, dark guest room, when you let my late husband's belongings be thrown in a pile, did you ever ask yourself how you could be so cruel? My gaze shifted to Jessica, whose face was red and white. And you. You talk about taking care of your parents. That is your right. I never stopped you. But, my voice turned to ice, living in my house, while eyeing my bank account and expecting me to pay for your filial piety? That is not your right. In 3 months, how many times did you call to see how I was? Not once. Unless it was to hint about money or to demand the house. Did you ever once ask if I was okay? Before they could answer, I picked up my phone and hit play. It was the voice memo from my neighbor. Jessica's sharp, complaining voice filled the silent room. I'm so sick of it. That old woman is so stubborn. She's got her pension. Why is she hoarding it? It's not like she can take it with her. It's all just going to be ours anyway. And now she moves out and leaves us with this whole mess. The recording was crystal clear. Jessica and Matthew's faces turned purple. Jessica looked horrified. She never thought I'd have proof. See? I turned it off. That's your family. That's your respect. You can't have it both ways. You can't enjoy my generosity while treating me like dirt and still expect to inherit everything I own. The world doesn't work like that. Jessica, having been exposed, just decided to drop all pretense. So what? She put her hands on her hips, her voice dripping with scorn. So what if I complained? We're the ones who are supposed to take care of you. Your money, your house, it should be ours. You give it all away. Who's going to take care of you when you're sick and old? Huh? Those strangers? I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. Take care of me after you threw me out of my own house? You call that taking care of me? Let me be perfectly clear. I would rather light my money on fire and watch it burn than leave a single dime to ungrateful, manipulative parasites like you. And as for my old age, you don't need to worry about it. I have my pension. I have my own home. I'm in good health. And if the day comes when I can't take care of myself, I will sell that house and move into the nicest retirement community I can find. That would be 100 times better than living with you. Mom, how can you say that? Matthew pleaded, trying a different tactic. We're family. Blood is thicker than water. Family? I stared him straight in the eye, my gaze unwavering. The moment you stood by and watched me be evicted from my own room, the moment I saw my husband's things thrown on the floor, the family you're talking about shattered into a million pieces. Don't talk to me about blood. Your credit with me is maxed out. Seeing the emotional appeal fail, Jessica went nuclear. Fine, Eleanor. I'm telling you, if you try to donate that money, we will sue you. We'll tell the court you're mentally incompetent, that this is malicious abandonment. Sue me? I actually laughed out loud. Be my guest. I pulled a business card from the envelope and slid it across the table. This is my lawyer. You can talk to him. Oh, I added, pulling out another document, and this is a full physical and psychiatric evaluation I had done last week. It certifies that I am in perfect health and of sound mind. My will is notarized and legally ironclad. My eyes narrowed. As for abandonment, let's think about that. Who exactly abandoned whom? Who kicked whom out of their home? I have texts. I have recordings. I'm more than happy to discuss it in court. Then I delivered the final blow. And one more thing. The deed to that house you're living in? It is 100% legally in my name. I have the right to take it back at any time. I was going to let it go, for Matthew's sake. But since you want to play dirty, fine. I'm giving you 1 month. Pack your bags, take your parents, and get out of my house. If you are not gone in 30 days, my lawyer will file for a formal eviction. The 1 to 2 punch no inheritance, and now eviction hit them like a freight train. Matthew completely fell apart. He finally understood I wasn't bluffing. He actually fell to his knees. He crawled forward and grabbed my legs, sobbing hysterically. Mom, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I listened to Jessica. Please, Mom, don't kick us out. Don't give the money away. I'll do anything. I'll divorce her. I'll divorce Jessica. Mom, I'll do anything. Just please don't disown me. His tears soaked my pants. It was a pathetic, heartbreaking sight. Jessica, seeing her entire plan go up in flames, immediately turned on the waterworks. Mom, I was wrong too. I was just trying to help my parents. I was trying to do what was best for the family. Please, forgive us. We'll be better, I promise. We'll never do it again. They were a real tag team. If this had been 3 months ago, my son's tears might have broken my heart, but not anymore. My heart was solid rock. I looked down at their desperate, ugly performance with nothing but disgust. I pushed Matthew's hands off my legs and stood up, looking down at them. It's too late. When you treated me like a fool, when you looked at my home as something you were entitled to, when you treated me like trash, that was your choice. I gave you chances. You trampled them. Your tears mean nothing to me. You made your bed. Now lie in it. I pointed to the door. My decision is final. You have 1 month. Now, get out of my apartment. My voice was iron. They stared at me, their faces a mask of hatred and shock. Jessica looked like she wanted to spit, but she knew she had lost. Matthew, looking completely destroyed, let her pull him to his feet and drag him out the door. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet living room. The sun was streaming in. I took a deep breath. I felt exhausted, but for the first time in years, I felt light. I had finally cleaned the poison out of my life. 1 month came and went. Unsurprisingly, they were still there. Instead of packing, they sicked the relatives on me. The guilt trip started. Eleanor, how can you do this to your own son? He's your blood. Jessica learned her lesson. Just give the kids another chance. Don't be so heartless. Think of your grandson. This time, I didn't even bother to argue. I had my lawyer send an official, certified eviction notice. It stated that if they were not off the property by the deadline, he would file for a court-ordered removal. As for the relatives, I blocked their numbers. I was done. I went on with my life. I went to my classes. I had coffee with my friends. I even posted a few pictures on Facebook from a little weekend trip I took, and some of my new watercolor paintings. I made sure to post photos of me smiling, surrounded by friends looking happy and healthy. I knew they'd see them. Finally, facing a legal eviction and the very real threat of the sheriff showing up, they cracked. Jessica's parents, apparently unable to stand the side-eye from the neighbors and the stress of it all, quietly packed up and went back to their rural county. With their common enemy, me, gone, Matthew and Jessica turned on each other. The pressure of being broke and homeless made them explode. She blamed him for being a weak mama's boy. He blamed her for being a greedy monster who had ruined his life. The final straw, I heard, was when Matthew discovered Jessica was secretly transferring the last of the money from their joint checking account to her own, and had already met with a divorce lawyer. He finally saw that she had never loved him. She loved what she thought he would inherit. They filed for divorce 2 days before the eviction deadline. It was messy, but it wasn't my problem. The day after, they moved out separately, each with just a few bags. My lawyer handled the key exchange. Jessica, I assume, went back to her parents. Matthew rented a cheap, dark little room in a rundown apartment complex way out in the boonies. My lawyer asked what I wanted to do with the house. I thought about it and decided to have it cleaned, put in new carpet, and rent it out. The extra income would make my retirement even more comfortable. A few months later, Matthew showed up at my door. He looked 10 years older. He was gaunt, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were dull. He just stood there and whispered, "Mom." I let him in. He sat nervously on the edge of the sofa, wringing his hands. After a long silence, he looked at me, his eyes red. "Mom," he choked out, "I know, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I wasn't a man. I let you down." He just sat there and cried, apologizing over and over for how he had betrayed me. Looking at him, my son, I did feel my heart soften. But I wouldn't make the same mistake again. I listened. When he was finished, I said, "Matthew, I'm glad you understand what you did. You are my son. That will never change. I acknowledge that. But," my voice became firm, "what you and your ex-wife did destroyed the trust between us. A simple, 'I'm sorry,' can't fix that. You can't just glue a broken mirror back together and pretend the cracks aren't there." I looked him in the eye. "I will accept you as my son. You can come and visit me, but we will not go back to the way things were. You are an adult, and you have to walk your own path. I will not be your safety net. I will not be your ATM. If you can grow up, get your life together, and learn what responsibility really means, then maybe, over time, we can rebuild something. But for now, this is how it has to be." I didn't give him any money. He had to learn to stand on his own. My life, on the other hand, is wonderful. I'm busy. I'm taking a history class now. My friends and I have potlucks. We go line dancing in the park, and we're planning a trip to Florida next spring. I am healthy, my finances are secure, and my mind is at peace. And that, Will? I haven't changed a thing. I get regular updates from the foundations. When I see the pictures of the students who got scholarships, or read about the new comforts provided at the hospice, I feel a sense of purpose that is worth more than any inheritance. Sometimes, I share my story with my friends, not to brag, but to warn them. In your later years, you must protect yourself, protect your assets, and protect your boundaries. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep your children warm. Their happiness is their own responsibility. Our first job is to live our own lives with dignity. The greatest wisdom of old age isn't how much you leave behind for your children. It's how much dignity and how much freedom you saved for yourself.